Welcome to Esoteric Recaps. The viewer sees a tree home from a window in a workshop at the start of the story, before turning and zooming in on a bedroom in a dollhouse that is also in the workshop. For the funeral of their 78-year-old grandma Ellen Taper Lee, Steve Graham wakes up his 13-year-old daughter Charlie and adolescent son Peter. Charlie is found dozing off in the treehouse by Steve. At her mother's funeral, Steve's wife Annie, a miniature diorama maker, gives the eulogy. Throughout the discourse, Charlie draws a bizarre cartoon and clucks. At Charlie's bedtime that evening, Annie talks to her about Ellen. According to Charlie, her grandmother has always hoped that Charlie was a boy. Charlie worries aloud who will take care of Annie now that Ellen is dead, which confuses Annie. When Annie is in her workshop, she looks through a memory book and later has a terrifying vision of Ellen. A bird is killed as it flies through a window in Charlie's classroom at school. Charlie removes the bird's head by going outside. Across the street, a woman waves to Charlie. Annie starts looking into apparitions. Steve learns that Ellen's grave was vandalized from the cemetery, but he chooses not to tell his wife. Annie claims to be going to a movie with Steve, but she actually joins a support group for grieving people. It is nighttime when she arrives for the rendezvous. Annie is honest about her mother's mental health problems, including dementia and dissociative identity disorder. A mysterious light is visible to Charlie in her bedroom. Sylvia Archer, the owner of the gallery, speaks with Annie about the development of her recent paintings. To attend a party where he might run across Bridget, a student he likes, Peter begs his mother for permission, since he stated it was a function related to their school. Annie asks Peter if he invited his sister to accompany him. Charlie has a vision of her grandmother being engulfed in flames. When Charlie is jolted out of her stupor, she makes her distinctive clucking sound. Annie hears Charlie tell her she wants Ellen. Peter is coerced by Annie to bring Charlie to the event. Peter ignores Charlie so he can smoke marijuana with Bridget and their pals after becoming irritated with having to watch out for his sister. Charlie unintentionally consumes chocolate cake that contains a chemical to which she is allergic while unattended. Charlie has an allergic response and starts choking. Peter rushes his sister to the hospital down a pitch-black country road while carrying her to his car. Charlie pokes her head out the window to get some fresh air. To dodge a moving animal, Peter swerves. Charlie's skull brutally collides with a utility pole, leading to her decapitation. Peter then drives home in a relaxed haze after lingering and gazing in enthralled shock. When it is light outside, Annie steps out and is shocked to see her daughter's headless body in the back seat of the car. The funeral for Charlie is held by the family. Steve peruses Charlie's drawing sketches in his sketchbook. Peter has a panic episode before riding his bike home from school while consuming marijuana. In the dark, Peter makes it to his house. While in her car parked in the driveway, Annie is by herself and grieving. While remaining in the parking lot, Annie makes the decision to back out of the meeting for her grief support group. She shows up in the dark. Joan, a group mate, spots Annie and stops her before she can go so they may talk. Joan confides in Annie about the loss of her own child and grandson after learning of Charlie's passing. Steve approaches Annie when she gets home, but she rejects him. In the attic, Annie slumbers. In his room, Peter sees what he believes to be a vision of his deceased sister after hearing Charlie clucking, but it turns out to be his own sweatshirt in the corner. Joan receives Annie at her apartment. Annie tells Joan of a time when she was sleepwalking and covered herself, Peter, Charlie, and everyone else with paint thinner from head to toe. When she woke up, she was going to light a match. Annie's body language suggests that she was holding a can of paint thinner in her right hand and matches in her left. According to Annie, her interactions with her kids were never the same after that. Steve comes into Annie building a frightening recreation of Charlie's death scene. During an unpleasant meal with Steve, Annie, and Peter, Annie accuses her son of being the cause of Charlie's demise. In response, Peter reminds Annie that it was she who compelled Charlie to attend the party. Joan and Annie cross paths in an art supply store. Annie is enthusiastically informed by Joan that she once went to an open seance, and that experience made her doubt psychics. Joan reveals to Annie that a medium taught her how to conduct a seance, and was able to summon her deceased grandson, Louis. Joan's car's trunk contains a chalkboard. Annie is welcomed by Joan to come see a seance in person. Joan appears to make contact with Louis, who communicates using a glass and a chalkboard. Joan promises Annie that by utilizing a memento from the deceased, saying a mysterious incantation, and making sure that her entire family is present during the summoning, she can perform a similar conjuring on her own. After that, when Annie is driving home, she hears clucking. The next morning, Annie awakens to discover a trail of ants leading to Peter's corpse. Over her son's bed, Annie breaks out of her sleepwalking trance, which sparks a conversation with Peter. Peter questions Annie's apparent fear of him, unwillingly admitting that she attempted to have a miscarriage and never wanted to be Peter's mother. When Annie abruptly awakens, she realizes that she had been having a vision within a vision. While Steve and Peter are sleeping, Annie recites Joan's spell using Charlie's sketchbook. Annie ecstatically awakens her husband and son for another seance while claiming to have called Charlie. Annie seems to be under Charlie's control. While Peter shouts out in bewildered horror, Steve drenches Annie to break her trance. Peter notices the same weird light that Charlie had previously noticed in her bedroom while at school. Peter observes that the way his reflection seems to him has changed. Annie receives criticism from Steve over Peter's belief that a vengeful spirit is posing a harm to him. When Annie accidentally breaks a miniature model chair, she becomes enraged and destroys her workspace. Peter has a dream in which his sister is dead and her head slips off, turning into a plaything on the floor, before she is strangled in his bed. Peter claims his mother is hitting him once more while sleepwalking. Peter is advised by Annie not to tell Steve what transpired. Then Annie goes on to say that she is the only person who can stop a supernatural occurrence that is taking place in the home. Annie throws Charlie's sketchbook into the fireplace after realizing the spirit she conjured is evil. Annie is forced to save the book when her arm starts to catch fire, mirroring the burning book. When Annie goes back to Joan for assistance, no one is there, and she stays outside of her house. The camera reveals that Joan's home is decorated with witchcraft accoutrements, such as a picture of Peter inside a ritual triangle and a sign Annie is familiar with from old pictures. The emblem, according to Annie, is connected to the demon Paimon, one of the lords of hell. Additionally, Annie discovers pictures of Joan and Ellen, demonstrating that Joan and Annie's mother belonged to the same coven that was dedicated to obtaining wealth by transforming Paimon into a masculine body. Annie finds Ellen's headless body in the attic of her home. Peter can hear Joan yelling at him from behind a fence at the school, "I expel you." Peter overhears Charlie clucking in class. Peter screams in pain and terror as he abruptly bangs his head into his desk while acting possessed. We can see that Peter's room in the actual house is not there, as Annie stands in the pouring rain next to the treehouse holding Ellen's scrapbook. Peter is brought home by Steve. When Annie gets close to the car, the rain has stopped and she is dry. Steve is informed by Annie that Ellen's headless corpse is in their attic. Additionally, Annie displays to Steve the images of Joan and Ellen with the Paimon seal. Annie explains that when she attempted to get in touch with Charlie, their family was cursed. Annie adds that Steve must burn Charlie's sketchbook in order to save Peter, as she also explains the connection to the book. Even though she fears it may kill her, Annie throws the sketchbook back into the fire when Steve will not burn it. Instead, Steve catches fire without warning. Peter gets out of bed to look around the house as his possessed mother lingers in the space above his bed. The attic ladder is pulled and gone as Peter exits his room. Peter discovers his father's burned body. Annie chases Peter to the attic while under the influence. The attic ladder has been removed. After Peter has climbed the ladder and lowered it into the second-floor ceiling, Annie leaps up and violently bangs her head against the attic door. Peter discovers flies, candles, and a picture of his face, with the eyes pierced in the attic. The body of Ellen is gone. Before slicing her own head, Annie suddenly hovers over Peter. Peter rushes out the window when he sees this horror. Peter appears to be knocked unconscious when his head strikes the ground below. The strange glowing light that was previously visible hovers over Peter as he gets up. The headless body of his mother glides into the treehouse, and Peter pursues it. Inside the tree home, Peter is greeted by a group of mostly undressed devil worshippers. A statue of Paimon is topped with Charlie's severed head. We see Annie and Ellen's decapitated bodies lying down on the ground in front of the monument. As a lady crowns Peter, Joan's voice addresses him as Charlie, yet the coven congratulates the entrance of the demon by referring to Peter as Paimon. Like and subscribe for more notifications. Thanks for watching.